Clix and Duke somehow keep getting better and better. They won the first Elite Weekly Cup Finals. Let's find out how. Speed and precision is exactly what makes this team great. They have practiced loot paths and are able to get out of their POIs so quickly. They're leaving with max heals and solid loot ASAP, pretty much max mats as well. Duke is also going to max his chrome splashes on the way out by throwing it at the tree and then spraying it to make sure he gets 8 on the way out of the POI. They're leaving 30 seconds before first zone starts closing. If we just take a look at the map and see where everyone else is, they're way behind and still at their location. The only teams that have left are players that are not looting a POI and doing split drops. Much like we saw from them last season, these two are going to get to a specific spot. Much like an NBA player trying to find their spot, these two are trying to find their spot within the map, and it's clearly going to be on these hills outside of Sanctum or last season's Sanctuary. They post up here, and we can see Duke is going to build what only can be described as a porta-fort. And you may ask, why is he building a porta-fort? Well, there's a couple of reasons. One, you're going to be able to peek through the edits without being seen. So you can look through the cones without having to actually peek yourself and put yourself at risk for damage. Secondly, all you have to do is quickly edit the cones and then take shots if you see a player making a rotate, over peeking, things like that. You can also go up above, but the quick edits are going to be much safer. It gives them that high elevation to get that vision, and they pretty much see the entire lobby all around them. Part of getting to their spot and why that's so important is because of the information it gives around them. So when they're forced to rotate here in second zone, they can envision that rotate. They're going to see where the teams are before they make a move. They find a path that is going to avoid all of their enemies. Then, once they're ready to go and they've seen where everyone's at, they're going to use the chromes, which is going to prevent them from getting headshot sniped. Yes, you will still take damage, but I've rarely, if ever, seen a headshot snipe out of chromes, so it's just much safer to avoid getting your game completely ruined. And they are going to get as far as they can before they start to get pressured, and not going to force it much past that. They're just simply going to base up on some brick, get that refarm in to make sure they keep their material count high, and then they're going to look back. Hey, we rotated fairly quickly here, so everyone behind us is going to have to take a similar path. This is going to allow them to hold all of the teams that rotate behind them. And that's because of their early rotate. They're going to be constantly active looking for tags. That will keep them above Storm Surge and not make them take a terrible fight. And additionally, their pressure while putting tags on players is going to keep teams off of them. So even if a shambles team is going to come in and need some Storm Surge, they've already forced those teams away from them, so those teams will fight somebody else. Now let's talk about their fourth zone rotate. They're going to have to be slightly patient and understand what everyone is doing around them. We see Clix hop up in his cone and start scouting what other players are doing. He sees everyone shooting somebody else or closed off to them. So that gives him the knowledge that he can rotate through this open area that they're going to be forced to move through with relative ease. Yes, they are going to start to get tagged up as they do make this rotate, but their timing is very important to get the most out of running without having to fully tarp into this zone. They're going to get to some builds or some farmable materials, build up, pause for a second, wait, and then they're going to try and find another quiet moment to make the rest of this rotate. Now, it's really important to do this because you don't want to just be trying to bowl in a china shop your way through every single rotate. Sometimes being quiet, being sneaky, waiting for the right moment is going to be the best play. Then when they do their second half of this fourth zone rotate, we see Duke is a step behind, which is going to cause him to get shot. So when you're making rotates like this, you want to be right on top of each other because players will typically see the first person rotate and automatically know a second player will be right behind them and sit there and wait to take shots. Try and be as close as possible to avoid being the second player in this situation if you're right next to each other. Either way, they only take a little bit of damage, get further into zone to avoid the edge chaos and potential Storm Surge keyers, plus they're going to get to a God Rock and get that extra mats if they want it. Now this is a solid move. They're going to see a player rotating in on the edge, and both Clix and Duke are going to look at that player, be able to get the finish onto a knocked player as well as some damage onto that player, and it pretty much just falls into the arena that allows them to grab this entire refresh. So you see Duke is going to extend first, make sure he fully builds in hard materials to take over that refresh, get that, claim it as their own, and then they're going to have that space to play out of and make a perfect situation for them with extra materials in order to rotate for fifth zone. Now we can see at the start of fifth zone, they're going to start to build using all of those extra materials. This is a great piece of their game. You're getting that refresh in fifth to make sure your materials are capped, and then you're even getting a little bit extra, and you're making sure you're spending all of those mats, not just leaving them behind. It's going to protect you on the rotate, and then they're going to wait for a second, again, find a quiet moment, and then just run the rest of this rotate into fifth zone. We see Clix is going to turn around and leave his back open to allow Duke to get in and not have to build a separate third box on his rotate in to protect himself. We see most players when they're getting up to a wall will build a box quickly before editing it. These guys want to avoid spending any extra mats, open that space, and this is really smart here by Clix. And additionally, Clix 200 IQ play, gonna build himself some space up just in case this goes up that hill right next to them. They're gonna be able to play that extra box he built on the way up and make that rotate. Zone does wind up pulling up the hill, so that extra box that gives them the slightest elevation and that front side of this hill is going to allow them to be one step ahead of their opponents when they make this rotate. Sprint ahead of the pack of players to avoid the congestion, then they wait for a second to avoid needing to full tarp or get tagged up a bunch on their rotate. So they're going to go as far as they can before they get into any trouble, box up preemptively, and then pause. Then this is when chromes start coming in. They're going to use chromes to get the front side of zone, and then chrome once again once they're in the front side of zone in order to save those materials. As a duo, you're not able to tarp an entire end game unless you're getting 20 plus eliminations. Using the chromes and understanding how to use them is key. We can see Clix and Duke are still trying to figure out how to perfectly use them because they split here on this rotate, and it will also cause them trouble later on. So they've built themselves in full metal in zone, and typically this would be fine, but because of how quickly the chrome ARs fire, they're going to just shred through these metal builds, and it's going to cause some really big issues for Clix and Duke. Now ultimately they don't wind up going down, but one, they're going to take damage, two, they're going to spend a bunch of mats, and then three, they're going to be behind when it comes to the next rotate because they're so focused on protecting themselves from the team trying to drop them down. That pressure caused so many problems for them, and we'll see it escalate through this next zone. Because things didn't go to plan in the previous zone, they're going to be slightly behind and have to figure this out. So that makes them full tarp. Ideally, you'd be using chromes to just get ahead in this zone and not have to spend a full tarp worth of material, but they're forced to because things were going a little crazy, and they also know there's a team right below them looking to make a play. They show a little bit of versatility with Duke taking over the front side of the tarp and being able to tarp for this duo with Clix just holding the backside for a second. It's nothing too crazy, but it is showing the evolution of this duo. Clix and Duke are going to get separated. Clix is going to fall. Now it is up to Duke to clutch this up, and we can just see how good he is at this game. In 8th zone, Duke is left with almost nothing when it comes to clutch time, but he isn't afraid of the moment. What we see from him, he's going to dive into Storm in order to make the optimal rotate. A lot of players avoid taking Storm damage, but knowing that you can use it and make a better rotate or a safer rotate just by taking a couple of ticks is a key part of the game. So he only has a few builds left here, and he needs to get a refresh or get into a building to refarm. And he's kind of going to do both of that. He's going to play the backside of zone perfectly until he finds a refresh, but that is another shambles player he's going to get, so he still has a lot of work to do. He's going to start to build out some space to play out of and gets a slight refarm on the building on his way in. Essentially, he's just waiting allowing the game to play out and trying to avoid getting seen here on the backside. Now this is something we call ratting. It's just playing as a solo in a weird position, typically on low ground on the backside of zone within a match, and really all you're doing is trying to avoid being seen. Sometimes the only thing you could do is rat on the low ground, and it may sound like a negative term, because it kind of is. You're playing a little sneaky, trying to hide from people, but this is optimizing your placement and trying to get the most out of this game. We can see that Duke is going to play the backside with the little builds he has and make sure every player is in front of him. So he's bringing up the backside of zone, making it more simple to see everyone is in front of me, no one's behind me, all I have to do is focus on the players in front. Then he's going to find a knock in builds through the chaos going on. He's going to grab some extra materials and then continue to get a couple extra materials along the way, even hit this campfire to get a little bit extra HP to make sure he's as healthy as possible. And the chaos continues. Ultimately, it's going to come down to a 1v1 between Duke and the high ground player. He's not going to be able to get that final elimination, but nonetheless, turning what could have been a 20th 15th place into a second place. This is why these guys are becoming legendary as a duo. They're optimizing every game, and this is something we see about the best players in the world. Shout out to Duke and Clix. You guys are absolutely crushing it right now.